This is the voice of retards speaking on behalf of the fora tonight. And I thought I would help those who are not gifted with great intelligence or even mediocre intellect or even blessed by God with a brief period of sentience, which tends to dispel with, I was thinking of another word, dissipate. What? That's very good. I didn't know you knew that word. Dissipate, yes. Dissipate with age. And so in that case, I'm here to remind everybody on the fora, in case you got senile and forgot, that Macrobius is a midwit. Now, there are many topics we could talk about instead of Macrobius. You know, we could talk about my TikTok research and what I've discovered from studying TikTok about the American mind in 2024, or we could talk about biohacking and my advances in biohacking studies and science and so on and so forth, because it appears to me from following the preeminent and premier biohacking accounts on, what is that site? It's it's Substack. Yes, Substack. That I am running with about neck and neck with the best individuals with the greatest amount of knowledge on this subject who have Patreons and so forth. So I have a lot of information, and I'm staying basically abreast of those individuals who are charging for that information. So I have a similar level of knowledge of those individuals who are charging for that information. And personally, I think we're all behind the curve, and there must be another level of knowledge out there somewhere. But that's how I've been able to stay as far ahead of the curve as I am, assuming I am, which, to a certain degree, if, I take no credit for being intelligent or anything else. I just think everybody else is an idiot, if we lived in the 1950s, I'd be, drinking my life away like a good Indian, and it's just everything has fallen to so low a degree that I am now, it's kind of like an idiocracy where the soldier is frozen in time and he comes out of it being not very bright in the past, and now in the future he's a genius, so that's happens. And then we have individuals like Macrobius who are still alive, but they're midwits and they can't actually function in a society. They don't have anything to offer a society. And this is what I want to bring to the audience tonight, such as it is, because that's why I say Macrobius is a fraud and he can't offer anything to society. Now, I'm not going to go deeply into my personal reminiscences of Macrobius tonight. Rather, I'm going to point out his midwit stats. That's all I want to do. I want to demonstrate to this audience that Macrobius is a midwit. Macrobius is really no smarter or even better educated than you, gentle listener or viewer, so to speak. I was thinking about this in terms of academics I have known and how they react to things and the analogies that they draw and the just the information that they come up with, how they process information, how they react to information. And that's how Macrobius, his whole shtick, his whole methodology of response and putting information out there is this, because he's a lonely man at the end of the day. He's very lonely. He has no friends. He is in this corner of the internet, not doing good works, but just literally he has nobody else to talk to. He's just like you. So that being said, I wish I had said that. That's how Tio found me. He pressed in all the he pressed in all my catchphrases. He typed them all in into the AI, and it came up with my new account. But I was going back to my initial assertion. This is something macrobius does a lot, and it's what we call a midwit tell. And so I'll reference, let's say, the author Thomas Carlyle to academics, professors, a professor of English, if you will. And the professor of English will respond to my reference of Carlyle with a reference to the Sartor Resartus, which is the Taylor Retailored, Carlyle's seminal work on language, so to speak, and semantics or whatever, so to speak, and philology, whatever. And the reason he refers to the Taylor Retailored is because this was on his reading list of books he was, supposed to read about Carlyle, because Carlyle is a important figure in 19th century English literature. So you can't ignore Carlyle if you're studying 19th century English literature. And consequently, there is a reading list for individuals who are studying for their doctorate, if you indeed want to become a professor. And on this reading list is the book Sartor Resartus. So the reason they will bring this up is to demonstrate that they have a familiarity with Thomas Carlyle. But it's a very passing familiarity with it, because the only literature they have consumed by or about him, or anything related to him, was or were the books that were required reading in the university. They never branched out and read anything about any other of his works except that which was required. And frankly, they couldn't read any other of his works, and they probably didn't read the works that were required. So it's very interesting that people do this. And obviously, you bring up something else, and universities aren't going to require you to read Carlyle's History of the French Revolution, for example. Charles Dickens said he read that over and over again every time he wanted to think, or every time he hit a brick wall, he would read Carlyle's History of the French Revolution. And, I never really thought about that or gave that too much thought. And then I read the History of the French Revolution. I said, whoa, this is a serious business. It makes me think about everything else. So I can see how Dickens used it for inspiration. It's a very interesting work, and written in a very red-blooded fashion, So that was very interesting. And, obviously you had Carlyle, and then you had Belloc later on, and many other individuals. So obviously this is a trick, as I said, that midwits use. It's a midwit tell. And Macrobius does this with his Latin. Everything comes back to Macrobius Latin. And, I was thinking years ago, like, we're talking 2007. I was thinking, this is brilliant. Curtis Yarvin has just come out. He's going to write poetry in code. It's going to be the greatest thing ever. And Macrobius is going to code in Latin. It's going to be the greatest thing ever. And at the same time, as I was thinking these things, I was thinking, somehow I don't think I'll care one way or the other what they do with their coding. And I was right, because obviously nothing they coded ever amounted to anything. The Urbit language was irrelevant, and had absolutely no impact on anything. And Macrobius can't code to save his life, probably. I mean, if he actually had to code something useful, like in the renovation of the Fora, you saw how that went. He has a very primitive knowledge of coding. There was very little else he did, I think, in comparison to what Flack could have done had he had the time and the space to do it. And yeah, it might have been an on the job training, but I think Flack could have done it one way or the other. So this is what happens with Macrobius. He's a midwit. He uses his Latin to obfuscate the fact that he is not very bright. And he learned the Latin because nuclear physicists do not go back to school and learn Latin. That's something you learn when you're young and you stick with it, or something of that nature. But you see, Macrobius claims to be this nuclear physicist. He's never done any hard science work in his life. And, as I say, he's a fraud. A lot of people don't realize that. He is a total, utter fraud. Even if he is everything he says he is, which I don't deny, he's still a total, utter fraud. A lot of people don't get that. But like I said, the Latin covers a lot. And there was a word I was trying to think of to describe millennials for the last couple of years. I couldn't think of it. And that word is supercilious. And that word describes Macrobius to a T. Macrobius is a very supercilious individual. And, it's obvious when you think about it. When you think about how Macrobius gets on, how he talks, how he behaves on these forums, how, he was raised in a gay boys boarding school or whatever. And, what is the defining trait of Perfidious Albion? Superciliousness. Yes. That is the defining trait of the Anglo-Saxon, superciliousness. It's not boldness or venturesomeness or whatever. It's superciliousness. And in the past, the superciliousness of the Anglo-Saxon was meant to be kind of how to put this correctly. It was kind of, they were being supercilious to be nice because they were so superior to most everyone else that they acted supercilious or eccentric to kind of dull their razor edge, or at least sheath their razor edge in a layer or a collection of eccentricities or superciliousness to just temper or control their superiority. It was a way of controlling or deflecting or just hiding their superiority, masking their superiority so it didn't shine forth. Now, on the other hand, the other reason people demonstrate superciliousness is that they are very insecure. And this, here we put our finger on Macrobius' problem. He is not so superior that he needs to be supercilious to make everyone feel better. He is so insecure that he is naturally supercilious, like most millennials and, frankly, most Generation X, most boomers. Most everyone's supercilious in today's society to one degree or another. So it's very interesting. And I was trying to think of that word for 2 years now. It just came to me. I've talked about millennials many times, but it describes Macrobius to a T because this is his issue. He is afraid of conflict. He was bullied relentlessly as a child. You can tell that now. And he has been afraid of physical conflict all his life. And he has been able to entirely avoid it by never going outside of his house, which is why he's so white today. And, he also weighs the better part of 300 pounds. And he's going to eat, he's going to eat his keto diet, with his Asian wife. And in their, their little subdivided house. It's funny. He gives away more than you might imagine when he posts those pictures of his houses because he's in a subdivision that's new construction. It looks like, and they built these houses so close together for all the code monkeys to live in. You act like you're in some kind of a good life, but basically everybody who has a certain degree of job is given a certain degree of importance. So you get to live in a house at this level, drive a car at this level, in order to function at this level as an employee. They don't want to see anybody with any trappings of the lower classes at a certain level, because this level has to deal with the next level who wants nothing to do with people from the everyday normie world. So consequently, Macrobius, he's afforded this house, but at the same time, it's just in one of these new built subdivisions, which everything back to back to back. You have this tiny little yard. He's going to have a worm farm, which, I would think that if Macrobius is going to have a worm farm, he's just not going to put the information out. Go and talk to Ix. Ix had the ant farm, until it sprung that leak and they all escaped. Ix was on the ground licking them up with his lizard tongue. Everybody forgets about these things, but I'm still here to remind us this all happened. It's just there on the floor licking the ants up, wearing his mother's underwear. People. This happened. People want to pretend a lot of this never happened. And so with Macrobius again, he's the quintessential midwit. He always has a midwit take, and he always wants it to be original and unique to show that he is a special individual. So this again is another midwit tale. He has to have this unique take. And the reason he has to have this unique take is that he has developed a certain position which he believes cannot be successfully assailed. And it's kind of unique. It's unique specifically because he knows that retards will attack him from below, and the smarter people will roll their eyes and ignore him. And so he's unassailable in this position because the below average nitwits aren't going to be able to dislodge him from his intellectual position or his statements. They're not going to be able to challenge his statements. But on the other hand, his statements seem innocuous enough and sufficiently congratulatory to not impact those individuals who would crush him like a fly, superior intellect, and so you can tell that this is his strategy. It's not just a perception, it's a reality. This is his strategy and how he deals with the world. And again, I've been watching Macrobius many, many years now, almost 2 decades of watching Macrobius. So I know what I'm talking about. It's not just imaginatory, imagination, not just my imagination. There's no word of imaginatory. I imagine there is. But when you get down to a lot of details, and this is something I'm doing with Macrobius, I'm actually eating away at his mind. And midwits break specifically the most rapidly under torture. And I'm engaging in psychological warfare against Macrobius because I believe Macrobius has engaged in psychological warfare against the Circle of Crust. So the only answer to the Macrobius issue is to basically take everything from him and give it to Pastor Lindstedt. Now, Pastor Lindstedt is a bona fide genius as a matter of public record, going back to his high school or his preschool testing. Apparently, they tested for IQ and also his military tests. He has a very high IQ, and Macrobius does not have a high IQ. I would estimate Macrobius IQ to be around that of George W. Bush, to be about 110 max. 110, yes. Now, does he have certain qualities that enable him to remember things? That's all it takes to be a successful, as Pastor Lindstedt would say. But if you are able to remember things, memorize things, and if we're taught that superpower as a child, which it's actually a learned, for the most part, you can learn it to some degree or the other, depending on your genetics for it. But all children can learn to memorize things successfully. So Macrobius' success is entirely due to the fact that as a child, he was raised in a church that valued memorization, and so he was able to do well in school and get all these stupid degrees that he has never used. I was a nuclear physicist programming computers. Tell me that. You're so smart. You're a nuclear physicist. And he was something else, probably irrelevant, no Latinist or whatever. But imagine you're programming computers. What's saddest about that? That's pathetic. So the only thing you could be doing worse than that is actually teaching nuclear physics. So again, going back to this situation, you see, this is Macrobius. This is what he does constantly, and it's a total sham. It's a total fraud. And if he was serious, going, about all this, he would have been able to, practice as a nuclear physicist. But he can't. He just did very well in school. And this is very interesting because we have the issue today with the doctors. Certain amount of memorization is homogeneity, and there isn't much homogeneousness in today's society. So we depend on the clan-based individuals from other countries to come in and basically perform those jobs that only those people from a homogeneous background with high memorization abilities can do. So that's why we have so many foreign doctors. Is because it's not because Americans can't be doctors; it's because they can't be doctors. They weren't. Americans aren't raised with any memorization abilities, and those that are incapable of using them correctly. So we have no individuals, primarily, certainly none younger than Macrobius, who did what Macrobius did, so to speak. So you see, the issue with Macrobius over time is he has attempted to exercise a pernicious influence on the circle of tests. He is determined to be the grime or worm tongue of the social media circle of crust, insofar as there is a social media circle of crust anymore, because pretty much everybody on the fora is King Theoden, except for me. Everybody else is collectively King Theoden. King Theoden should be the patron saint of the fora. This dilapidated. What's another word for that? Old person, demented, elderly individual, diminished. Who is just totally under control of this grandma worm Macrobius, who is convinced him that he is a great genius and a man of wisdom, and a counselor of sound mind, but certainly not in round body. Sound mind and round body, yes. And it's not going to work. And the millennials and Generation Z, overall, a lot of people would rather die than admit I was right about anything. And I'm all for it. I want to see them do that. But the fact of the matter is, nobody is going to, admit that, yes, I was right about Macrobius. Boy, this guy really is a fraud, This guy is a total fraud. But no, nobody's going to do that, at any point in time. I'm going to admit that Dr. Breck was right again about Macrobius being a total fraud and a total, waste of space. He's posting so much and using up your basically generating useless content, not adding anything at all to any site. But people are so desperate for traffic that they appreciate what Macrobius does, even though he does little or nothing worthwhile. He literally walks to and fro around the earth, seeking whom he can cause trouble for. And again, going back to the midwit tells, you look at Macrobius over time. You look at him going downhill. A true intellectual would have gone uphill. But water finds its own level, and this is what happened with Macrobius as compared to the guys on majority rights. They moved up. It's majority rights. Where do you have to go? You can go to countercurrents or whatever. Even Pastor Lindstedt goes there more. Not Macrobius. He's downwards. He's slumming constantly. He is moving downwards constantly, talking to more and more retards as his own IQ diminishes, as his dementia increases. And so that's the extent of dealing with Macrobius. You have to understand that Macrobius is roosting in these circles because everybody is an idiot or a barely sentient moron or somewhat senile on the forum. And so it's the ideal environment for Macrobius. Nobody there to challenge him. Some people are going to like his posts, and it's just an ideal advantage for him to take it. To you know, I'm not going to say he's the kind of individual to take advantage, but he will take advantage nonetheless. It's inevitable. And what is also inevitable is that people will continue to suffer his stupidity indefinitely, until he shuffles off this mortal coil of a massive coronary. So, again, we could have talked about so many other things, but I felt it was very important to do a broadcast on Macrobius, to continue diminishing the size of our audience, and also to, again, just talk about Macrobius and let people know about the dangers of dealing with this individual who is extremely untrustworthy and unreliable. So, without further ado, I'm going to close this broadcast, and we've got more coming up there in the very near future. But the fact of the matter is, I want people to know what they are getting into with Macrobius and to understand that he is a thoroughgoing fraud from the beginning. And I'm going to close up shop tonight. I think we're going to do some more good videos in the near future. I'm looking forward to it. We got a lot of good content coming. We got 3 more videos on Macrobius and 1 on Prac, or it might be vice versa. 3 on Prac and 1 on Macrobius, something of that nature. But in any case, I'm going to say hail victory and use both hands and to hail and say good night and God bless. And, TOTO, you can burn in hell now.